So here it is, though. We're going to open back in the second part, looking at Acts chapter 18. And last time we're looking at Apollos, a very interesting character who played a very important role in the early church. And I said he was coming from Alexandria. He was a Jew from Alexandria, right? So that's an important piece of information. Then I wanted to show what a Berber looks like, because I want us to look back on this and really understand a point. It's a point I want to make. We have people say, oh, the Bible, you guys, the Bible come from white man, it come from Europe. They forget that the gospel was down in Africa from the 1st century. What did they think a passionate man like the Ethiopian eunuch did with the gospel when he got it? He brought it to Africa. And the Ethiopians have had the gospel since whenever. And they had Judaism as well from even before. So I do not know where they get the seed from that we got all our teachings or all the gospel is centered in Europe. However, while I say don't know, there are certain things within the church that probably allowed for that to happen. I want to find a picture of some Berbers for me. Berbers are not Caucasian. So when you see a picture of St. Augustine, in fact, before you go there, just plug in St. Augustine and take a look at the pictures that are going to come up. Because I do believe that even though I say I don't know where they get this impression that this is a white man's gospel, I know that is so to speak. But I know because the Europeans have really painted everything Christian white, which is not so. St. Augustine was a Berber from North Africa, from the same place, Alexandria. So when you see, all right, when you see a picture of St. Augustine, in fact, some of the picture here might have a more accurate picture of Augustine than many of the ones we have seen over the years, right? I find that maybe some of these actually might look more accurate about who this man is. Coming again out of Alexandria, but at a later period than Apollos. He was coming more out of Alexandria, probably in the 4th and 5th century. I think 4th and 5th, I think it was century. But if you look at the Berbers, just put in Berbers and take a look at the picture. Those are the Berbers. Does that look anything like some of what people are trying to make out St. Augustine? Now, almost everybody has heard of St. Augustine because he was such a notable man. If you were to go to a set of books or put in the Confessions of St. Augustine, you're going to come up with his book. People read it. It's in bookshops still. After hundreds upon hundreds of years, it's still in the bookshop. So where do you go from a Berber, these are the Berbers, to a Caucasian white man being depicted as St. Augustine? I'm just saying that, to put everything into context. And he had quite a few persons in the first part of the church who came from Alexandria. Because as I said, it was one of the centers of Christianity. And if you could put up a map that would show where Alexandria was in the 1st century, that it would be a good map to look at. Because we have to get back the truth about Christianity, the origins, the thinkers of Christianity, and where they came from. So put that map up. So St. Augustine looked more like that than like some of the depictions that we see in European art work. Found the map?
Yes. Coming.
I think I had one on my notes as well, but let's look at Alexandria. So Alexandria was no joke place, right? It's right there, right? You look at the surrounding countries. So it's in North Africa. Just big. Can the picture be any bigger, or that's as big as it gets? Yeah. So Apollos obviously got the gospel somewhere down there. And then with his preaching, he came up. Or maybe he came up and then got the gospel up the top. We don't know how he got the gospel, but he was a preacher. And we know the Bible says that's where he came from. That's much better. So it's over there at the tip there with Libya and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and those places. And yes, so you can see the context from which Apollos came. All right? So he wasn't coming from the traditional people up the top there, but the Bible does say he was a Jew. Let's move on. We can go back to our reading now. So we can read from 27. Read from 27. All right, good.
When Apollos wanted to go to Achaia, the brothers and sisters encouraged him and wrote to the disciples there to welcome him. When he arrived, he was a great help to those who by grace had believed, for he vigorously refuted his Jewish opponents in public debate, proving from the scriptures that Jesus was the Messiah.
All right, let's look at it again. Because one of the big things we have seen in the Christian church in the book of Acts, and it's still in the Christian church today, is high levels of jealousy. Remember the Jews, one of the things or one of the motives for really harassing Paul in ministry was jealousy, was one of the motives. Now, look at how graciously they treated this gentleman. They said, man, accept this guy. That's how God wants church to be. Once you prove somebody and you know they're going to preach a gospel, come on, man, be gracious. There were people that Paul did not fully like their attitudes. And he said, as long as the gospel is being preached. But we have a cutthroat situation in the world today. They spend hours on YouTube tearing down people. You know what I think I reflected on? All of them call themselves apologists. And to me, when Paul, an apologist is somebody who preaches and defends the truth of the gospel. Now, Paul was to be a big example of apologist. He spent hours debating with others the scriptures. And if you notice, he taught the scriptures, he wrote the scriptures, and only a handful of times you're going to get him calling people's name and saying, this person is a bad guy. Very few names compared to the volume of his teachings. But what I see on YouTube, on social media in general, are people going and saying, we're apologists. And what they are doing is that they are going in there and they are packed with a bag of names. Who is that a true preacher? Who is this? Who is that? And very little teaching. So it's like the opposite. You're getting the opposite approach. And to me, that is very, very serious, right? So we need to let people be, especially, I know one particular gentleman saw a video on YouTube recently that he says, I know this is my last leg of my journey. And I prayed for him because he has been very, very vicious in the church, tearing down different areas, different types of ministers, in his so-called defense of the gospel, tearing the women preachers, tearing all this. And I said, God, forgive him, and bless him, and let him really, even his whole last phase, see you, right? So we need to get the attitude that Priscilla and Aquila had towards Apollos. We need to regain this attitude in the church. Now let's move on. Now, we're finished chapter 8 in terms of the text. Now, what I have here is just a review in the notes. You can read that personally of Paul's second missionary journey, just all the different places he went to, basically what he did. You can go down. I'm not going to necessarily dwell on it to a great extent. All right, you can read it on your own time. But I wanted to look now on, go up a little for me, please. Right. No. Maybe you're going too far. Main theme. All right. Yes, start with main theme. So we're back now at chapter 18. So you can read the review notes yourself in terms of today's reading. And by the way, the reason I put the review notes is because remember, it spans chapter 6, parts of chapter 16, 17, and 18. So we had to look at it to really just refresh your memory. So you can look at that in your own time. You just keep checking the web page, and when they're posted, you will have access. All right. So the main theme of 18 is that the gospel continues to spread in spite of persecution. Paul continues to plant churches and teach in fulfillment of his calling to the Gentiles. That's the main thrust. All right. So let's look at the key locations very quickly. All these cities with strange names and provinces. Some are provinces, some are cities. You have Athens, you have Corinth, you have Rome, you have Ephesus. He didn't really go to Rome, by the way. That's why I put an asterisk there. But it was mentioned, but he didn't go there. All right. Achaia, which is a province. Centria, I think that's spelled incorrectly. You can correct it for me, please. Syria, Ephesus, Antioch, Caesarea. These are some of the places that the second missionary journey, additionally to, and in addition to the ones we saw last week. We did up to Athens last week, and today we did from Athens down back to Caesarea. Let's move on. At least to some just before Caesarea. All right. Key characters. Paul, of course, is the center of it. I was going to say he's a star, and then I withdrew it because we have too many star ministers and star gospel singers. God did not call us to be stars, he called us to be servants. And that's where a lot of people are missing it. So when we start preaching the gospel or singing songs for Christ, suddenly we adopt, or we adopt the all the world has to offer in terms of packaging to our ministries. But what Jesus wants us to do, he wants us to be packaged as servants like he was packaged. Not like Hollywood stars. That was not his packaging. They have Paul, they have Aquila, Priscilla, Claudius, Timothy, Silas, Titius, Justus, Crispus. And Crispus, I think, might be spelled incorrectly as well. I don't know, there's an H in it. You can double check it. The thing is, Crispus, Paul mentioned him, he said, that's one of Crispus and Gaius are one of the few people I personally baptized. Then you have Crispus' household, the Jews, Galileo, Sosthenes, and Apollos. Double check some of those spellings on it. All right. Let us move down. Let's move down. Scroll down for me, please. All right. Key verses. The key verses I chose, Acts 18, 9 to 11. And this was the encouragement God gave Paul. And we looked at it in the other part of the teaching. I also selected Acts 18, 25 to 26. And it's the graciousness of the church people, that is Priscilla and Aquila, in how they treated Apollos. I saw it as a model for us, so we can go down. Key points. Paul diligently continues to preach the gospel. Paul starts his third missionary journey in 18 further down, right? God speaks to Paul to encourage him, and Paul adds team members as he goes along. And remember, Priscilla and Aquila were also tent makers. In fact, somebody pointed out a background to this. They said the area that Paul came from in Tarsus, that whole area was in a province called, I think it's pronounced Seleucia. I hope I pronounced it correctly. But they were known for the black rams here that was used to make tents. Now, we know that a certain area can become known for a product. Like there's an area in Bedford Gardens known for making pillows. So different areas get known for different products. And that area he was from, they had the goat hair that was used to make tents. And so, in fact, the person went further, because some things you don't know unless somehow you manage to discover it. When Paul said, rightly divide the word of truth, they said that was a common language of tent makers. Because when they were building their tent, they had to cut everything accurately. So you'd say to the person, rightly divide that span of whatever material they were using. And he said, we don't understand. But the truth is, we talk like that nowadays too. We take things out of our secular world or work world, and we bring it into the church and into church jargon. So this rightly divided was adopted from his tent making experience. And as you may know, Priscilla and Aquila were also tent makers. And whenever Paul was not being supported by the church, he made tents. So his life fluctuated. Sometimes you'll say he totally devoted himself to teaching the gospel. There are other times when he made tents. So there was none of them that he practiced totally all the time. So number 5, the Jews continued to harangue Paul and persecute the early church. Let's move on. Our messages for today, or the message for today. One is, I'm inspired by how graciously, as we said it before, Priscilla and Aquila deal with Apollos. Should be dealt, He did not know as much as they did concerning the gospel, but they instructed him with grace. 2, we should also be inspired by the tenacity with which Paul continued to preach the gospel in spite of persecution. And we should also, the message number 3, and you look at God is spelled incorrectly, my humble apologies all the time. 3, the message of God, the message God gave Paul, that he would be with him and that he should not be afraid, is an inspiration. Just make the corrections there for me. Thank you. All right, background information. All right. The first, we mentioned the times of the first missionary journeys and where in the Bible they are found. And we mentioned, if you scroll down, and we're not going to read it, but I have facts here on Alexandria, so you can understand a little bit, so you can know that the gospel was not just a European thing, not even a Jewish thing, because after they started to preach and it went to other nations, it was not a Jewish thing anymore. Let's go down, please. And these are some key scriptures, key Christians from the church in Alexandria. So Apollos, Clement. Now, if you're studying church history, you're going to come across these names like Clement, Origen. These are very serious church leaders. Athanasius, come on, you help me out here. Athanasius of Alexandria, right? Didymus the blind. These were serious theologians coming out of the Alexandrian church. And of course, I mentioned Augustine, who was a little later. All right? So that's just a map that shows that part of the world that Paul was traversing at that time. Sometimes you have to know which were the continents. And it's a then world that he would have had dealings with, or not even just Paul, but remember, we had apostles. That's something we cannot forget. That after Jesus taught his apostles, they dispersed. And even though you might not have heard the things they were doing, they had gone forth with the gospel. So they were all over the place. Some of them had gone to Spain, some to India, some down into Africa. So we will never know definitively that Lydia was the first European convert. Even though I've said it and I've heard it as a teaching, I really think we should re-examine it, because maybe not. We can say under Paul's ministry, she was. All right, so you can see all these various places. You hear the names, and some of the places are still there, some have changed. So when you look, the Asian church was eventually planted, because after God had said, don't go there and go there instead, and he went into Europe. eventually went back into Asia, right? But I'll close right here. But what am I saying? It's time to re-Christianize those areas that Paul went to. North Africa needs to be re-Christianized. Asia Minor and the deeper parts of Asia, Europe needs to be re-Christianized. All these areas, we need to re-Christianize them. And it could be that God wants us to do it. All right? So, may God richly bless you as we continue to study the scriptures.
God bless you, Pastor.
Also you too, Pastor. God bless you.